Welcome to the Inclusions Effect. Stories of hope where hearts connect. Side effects may include joy, advocacy, and inclusion too. You're listening to The Inclusion Effect, sharing love, strength, and respect. Side effects may include joy, advocacy, and inclusion for me and you.
Hello and welcome to the Inclusion Effect. I'm Anna and I'm here today to talk with guests and with all of you about disability advocacy, inclusion, and the ups and downs of navigating a world that isn't always built for the disability community. Today we're doing things a little bit differently. I actually do not have a guest, but because it's coming up towards the end of Down Syndrome Awareness Month, I thought I'd get on here and share a little bit about our diagnosis story, our early medical stuff, and really everything that's going on with our family. So I hope you guys enjoy that. This will be a shorter episode, but yeah, I thought that I would just share a little bit about myself. So first and foremost, if you follow me personally or my podcast on social media, yesterday I announced that our family is adopting. We have decided to grow our family in that way. We are adopting a toddler who is close in age to Addie, who lives in Colombia and who also has Down syndrome. We're pretty early on in this journey. We've got like a year ahead of us, and we are also fundraising money for this. It is really expensive. It's going to end up being about $70,000. I will go ahead and link our crowdfunding link in the show notes, but no obligation at all. We're adopting this child even if nobody gives us a penny. We're just working hard to save all the money we can, apply for lots of grants, fundraise what we can. I'm going to try to do some local fundraisers because we really want to grow our family in this way. And we're hoping that we can get matched with this girl and get moving on all of the stuff that comes with international adoption because it's a lot. We have a lot of paperwork. We have a lot of stuff to do. Yeah, adoption is new to me. It's something that Zach and I, my husband and I, have had on our minds and in our hearts for years and years and years. We've discussed it for a really long time. And now it's happening. I'm really excited. If anybody has any questions, comments, suggestions, opinions about that, please leave them in the comments on my social media, on this podcast, whatever. I'm happy to answer. I'm really an open book. So that's what's new. The kids are very excited. We obviously sat them down and explained, all the ins and outs of this, what the process is going to look like, what it'll mean for our family. And Liam and Chelsea are over the moon and totally grasp it. Addie, we weren't positive if she was really grasping it, but we do this thing where we ask her yes or no questions and she's able to sign yes or no and really grasp what we're talking about and understand when we ask really directly like that. And we did ask her yes or no, does she want a sister that's close in age to her? And she signed yes emphatically, repeatedly signed yes. So, does she grasp it? Who am I to say? It's a big concept to grasp that in a year we will all of a sudden have a new person living in our house who's not a baby, who didn't come out of mommy's tummy. But we're really excited. We're going to keep talking about it, keep explaining it, and obviously I will be sharing about that journey on my social media. So yeah. So I wanted to talk about our diagnosis story. So Chelsea is 10. She is my stepdaughter. She's with us every other week. I love her endlessly. When people ask, I say I have 3 kids. I don't discern between her being my biological daughter or not. I have 3 kids, unless it's like a medical question or it's like relevant to the conversation when anybody asks. I have 3 kids. So Chelsea's 10. She's our oldest. And then Liam is 4. And then when Liam was 8 months old, I think, we found out that we were pregnant again. And so the kids are 15 months apart. So Liam had actually already given us a run for our money as far as medical stuff goes. I didn't identify at the time with being a medical parent, but he did have severe breath holding spells where he turned blue and would pass out from birth, basically. He never really cried. We knew that if he was whimpering or crying, it meant that something wasn't really wrong, I guess, because if he was really upset, and this went on until about the time he turned 4, and occasionally he still has them at 4.5. But we knew that if he was really upset, he was going to hold his breath and pass out. The week he turned 1, he started having anoxic seizures following breath holding spells. it was really, really traumatic. And then we also found out a little bit later than that he also has some pretty severe allergies, including anaphylactic egg allergy. So, no eggs allowed in our house. We're really strict about that. Everybody in the family's got EpiPens, all the things. So we had already been going through that. And we found out we were pregnant with Addie. And we were overjoyed, over the moon. Oh my goodness. And we were going along with the pregnancy like normal. I've had historically very healthy pregnancies. We weren't really concerned about anything. We did do the NIPT test, just like we did with Liam, just to find out the sex, So this was a couple of weeks before Thanksgiving. We did the test, we did the blood work, and they told me, like, hey, you will have this back before Thanksgiving. You will. So because our family was going to be together, I bought this big balloon arch, pink and blue, and you can pop it, and it'll tell you what color. Blue if you're having a boy, pink if you're having a girl. You know exactly what I'm talking about. And that was the reason we did the NIPT test. Never in my wildest dreams did I think that we were going to get any results besides the sex of our child. Well, that Thursday comes, Thanksgiving comes, and we didn't get the sex. I had the balloon arch there, it's already blown up. The balloons were like deflating and slowly falling off. It was very depressing. It was very sad. It was a nice, sad reminder that we didn't know the sex of our baby, and so we weren't going to get to do that how we expected it, which now in hindsight is so minor. Oh my gosh. So the weekend kept going on, and I was just getting so antsy and nervous. And on that Sunday, I told Zach, as well as a couple of my friends, that I thought our baby had Down syndrome. And in hindsight, I don't think that was me, thinking I was psychic or being so in tune with my body that I could just feel her extra chromosome. Nothing like that. I think that in my very limited understanding of the NIPT test, that's like the main thing I knew it came back and showed. And that was what I knew. And so that was the most common thing. And so I said that. So, lo and behold, obviously I was right, because Monday morning comes, I call our OB. My husband was working nights at the time. I wake him up. I'm sitting on the bed. We call our OB, and she had to go across the street to the hospital to do an emergency C-section. So they were like, it's going to be a few hours. And I was like, I cannot wait. So I decided to chat in, the customer service chats with the company who did the NIPT test, because our OB's office sends it out to a third-party company. And I chatted in with them. I won't name drop them, but I chatted in with them, and they asked me all these security questions. And then they're like, you've already talked with your OB, right? And I was like, yeah, I totally already talked with my OB. Yes. And so then they released their files to me, and they said that we were having a girl. And our girl was, I want to say it was like 97% chance that she had Down syndrome. It was a really high number. And my feelings were all over the place. To their credit, they did link me to a few different organizations, online resources and stuff, and told me to talk with my doctor and stuff. But, I just cried. I got off that chat and just sat there and cried. And my husband and I had at first very different perspectives. He was immediately, okay. He was like, this is what we're doing. This is what's happening. We're having a child who has Down syndrome. And I wasn't not okay. I wasn't like, we have to not continue this pregnancy. We were both on board. I am pro-choice. I'm on record saying that. I'm pro-choice. But for us, that wasn't a deal breaker. It was just so scary at first. I was just hysterical. I was just sobbing. And then once I collected myself a little bit, calmed down with, this, I'm making it sound like it happened really fast. It's over a few hours. But after it calmed down, I immediately started Googling. I've joined the DSDN, Down Syndrome Diagnosis Network, their pregnancy support group. I followed lots of social media accounts of people who have children who have Down syndrome, who were thriving and all these things. I immediately sent a group chat to like my family saying, our child, who did not have a name yet, we had just found out that day that she was a she. I sent out a group chat to my family saying that our child is a girl and she has Down syndrome. And I remember my sister was asking, like, are you sure? Like, are you positive? And I was like, oh, I think so. I'm pretty positive. But that led me to doing some research. And from my research, I decided that we were going to do something called a CVS, which is basically just a amniocentesis test, but earlier on in pregnancy. So they lay you down on a table and stick a big needle into your stomach. They go into your stomach, and they basically test the blood to see for sure if your child has Down syndrome or not. And that is, I guess, a little bit controversial in the community, in the Down syndrome community, because it does come with an increased risk of miscarriage. At the time, I had never experienced a miscarriage. I was very, very fortunate of that. And so I think that maybe colored my decision a little bit. My husband and I had not experienced any miscarriages. And so we didn't really, I guess, fully take that risk into consideration, I guess. I mean, we knew it was there, but we didn't really see that as something that could happen to us. In hindsight, I wouldn't do that again, but I really wanted to know for sure. I wanted to be able to plan. This was still so early on in our pregnancy. We were like 12 weeks maybe. We found out at like 11 and a half weeks pregnant. Like, it was very early on. I just wanted to plan. I just wanted to know, and I wanted to be sure. Okay. So we drove up to Portland where they did the CVS tests near us, and this was the start of being asked so many times about terminating our pregnancy. And I'm laughing because it's so absurd. Because again, I am pro-choice, but we went into these offices saying, we want to see our child. We want to find out what's going on with our child. You know, we are excited for our child. This was planned, and we are purposely choosing this child. That was our demeanor. That was what we were saying. Like, we were literally telling doctors that, and we still kept getting asked. And I don't really even fault any of the specific doctors that asked us, because that is how they are trained. They are trained to make sure that they tell their patients their options, and they are not given the proper education to be able to tell families, hey, you're having a child with Down syndrome. Here's the supports in place. Here's what that looks like in the real world. Here is what your life really will turn out to look like. And is it big and bad and scary? Maybe sometimes, but not all the time. You know, we don't train medical professionals to be able to adequately deliver the news of your child is going to be born with an extra chromosome. We just don't. And I think that that's one of the biggest pillars of Down syndrome advocacy that needs to be worked on, is how medical professionals handle the news of a child having Down syndrome. So again, I don't necessarily fault any of the people. Nobody was overly horrific. I've heard some real horror stories of people having doctors tell them their child's not going to be worth it. It's going to be life ruining, all these things. Nobody specifically said any of that to us. They just repeatedly asked about if we wanted an abortion. So I don't hold them at fault for that, but it was traumatic for my husband and I. And this was still in 2021. And there was a lot of COVID precautions where I live, and I had to go to a lot of appointments by myself because we had a young child. He wasn't even 1 at the time at home still, as well as Chelsea, who was 6.5, maybe 7 at the time. And somebody had to be home with them. My husband couldn't come. The kids weren't allowed in any appointments because of the COVID rules. So I was by myself at a lot of these appointments, including our bi-weekly appointments at the MFM, the Maternal Fetal Medicine Clinic. Excuse me. And so it was really hard, because we also found out that Addie has an atrial septal defect, an ASD is what it's called, which is a congenital heart defect. And they also were telling us that she had something called a PDA, which is like another hole in the heart, and some other, like some hypertension and stuff like that, some other things going on with her heart. So it became a high risk pregnancy, and we continued with trucking on. You know, we called all the family and people that we thought we needed to know. We made sure that we were really clear about what we would and wouldn't tolerate. We wouldn't tolerate any ableism. We wouldn't tolerate anybody using the R word. We wouldn't tolerate anybody treating her any differently. I made an announcement post on social media, like how people make birth announcements. I made an announcement that our child would be born with an extra chromosome, and if you had any questions, get them out now, because when we're postpartum, we won't want to be dealing with it. And I would do that again 100 times over. It really helped that everybody knew before she was born, in my opinion. Again, I know everybody handles that differently. So we went on with the pregnancy as normal as we could. I bought a bunch of Down syndrome children's books. The one that I read to Chelsea and Liam, but again, he was an infant, was We'll Paint the Octopus Red. And this was so new to me. I was just sobbing the first time I read it to Chelsea, and I was trying to be quiet and keep reading through my tears, but I was just so emotional and overwhelmed, and she asked such thoughtful questions. And that book has a question, like a frequently asked questions part in the back of the book. I definitely recommend that book to anybody who's curious, because it's a child asking about what they'll do with their new sibling who has Down syndrome. Will we be able to throw balls? Will we be able to fly kites? Will we be able to climb and play? And it's about the parents answering those questions. And at the end, it has explanations of what Down syndrome is in kid-friendly terms. It's all really great. It was really great. And I read that to Chelsea repeatedly over and over again. And she was so empathetic and understanding, as much as a child can be, you know. And it was really helpful in that experience. It was all emotional and it was all helpful. The time came, and at 37 weeks exactly, I went into labor. I went to the hospital, and they tried to tell me that I was only 1.5 inches dilated, which is probably true. And I was like, I'm having this baby. I'm telling you, I need an epidural. I know it's coming. And they were trying to send me home, and my husband and I had to be like, no, this baby is coming now, I promise you. And Addie was born like less than 2 hours after that. I knew that she was coming. I knew that the 1.5 dilation didn't really make a difference because I could tell she was coming. She was like 3 pushes and she was out. She did come out blue and needing help to breathe, which was pretty terrifying. And then she did have to go to the NICU, but I did get some skin on skin time with her. Thankfully, it was amazing. Something that I try to talk about a lot because I think it's really important, is that I had this fear, especially the last trimester of my pregnancy. I had this fear that when Addie was placed on my chest, I would feel differently. And that's really, again, I've said it so many times, that's really ugly. And in hindsight, I don't love that, but that's how I felt. And I think that it's important to acknowledge that, because other moms might feel that way, and it's okay. Because when Addie was placed on my chest, I immediately, I'm going to cry just talking about it, but I immediately knew that that was not the case, that I loved this little girl just like I loved Liam, just like I loved Chelsea, even though, of course, I wasn't there for Chelsea's birth. But, you know, I loved her wholly as she was, exactly. And she was perfect for our family. I just knew it immediately. Like, her being placed on my chest right after I gave birth to her soothed every kind of worry I had. It really, really did. It was a very healing experience, I'll say, honestly. I'm so grateful for that. So, anyways, Addie was taken to the NICU pretty quickly, pretty much immediately. Zach and I got moved to our room in the mom baby department, and I found out pretty quickly that I couldn't stand up. Every time I sat up, like upright at all, I had this insane headache that's more terrifying than any migraine I've ever had, any kind of pain I've ever had. I was just immediately vomiting. And if I found out that I had to get something called an epidural blood patch twice, not once, but twice. So over the next 2.5 days, I tried to go see Addie, but I was having to like lay in the NICU chair. Like they just had a little chair next to her bed, and I was having to like lay sideways because I physically could not be upright. I was so nauseous and sick. And so twice in the next 3 days, I had to basically go get more epidurals, is what it was. I had to go back to the surgery department, is where they took me. And then they numbed me. They didn't have to put me under or anything, but they did the whole epidural process again 2 different times, basically, because the first time didn't work. I still had these horrible headaches, and I still needed a second blood patch. And so that was pretty horrible because I couldn't really be with Addie, and I also couldn't be at home with my other kids. Like it was horrible. But after the second one, I needed a couple hours to rest, and then I was finally able to go be in the NICU. Addie had jaundice, and she had some blood sugar issues and some feeding issues, and she spent a few weeks in the NICU, but it really was all pretty run-of-the-mill. It was pretty run-of-the-mill, I'll say. It was hard having to go home at night without her, but Liam was also a NICU baby, and he was a NICU baby in the height of COVID. He was born January 2021, so this wasn't a new experience, and while it wasn't fun, it was, we made do with it. Addie got to come home, and we were off to our life having a child with Down syndrome, and it was really amazing. We had actually closed on our house 17 days before Addie was born. We had just bought a house. We'd been living in my parents' house before that, and so it was all a really chaotic time. And we discovered pretty quickly after that I wasn't going to be able to work because Addie needed a lot more help than we had anticipated. She had a lot of feeding issues at first, and so We had to be readmitted to the hospital a few different times for failure to thrive. They'd place NG tubes, which is a nasogastric tube, which goes into your nose and down into your stomach. And yeah, but it wasn't anything crazy. Doctors had determined that she wouldn't need heart surgery right away, at least, and we were fingers crossed that we could put that off for a little bit, because that seemed crazy that our little baby would need heart surgery. You know, that just seemed wild. I became a stay-at-home mom full-time, which was not our plan. Like I said, we had just closed on a house right before that. Before the last few years before Eddie was born, I was the marketing manager of a cannabis extracts company here in Oregon that's very illegal. And I went to school for marketing. My first bachelor's degree is in advertising. And so it was kind of weird to have to all of a sudden be down to one income, and raising our kids and being with Addie full time and having all these therapies and these doctor's appointments and everything. It was pretty overwhelming. And then October comes, and we could tell that she was still losing some weight, and like things weren't going quite how we thought they should. And nobody was really listening to us. And in hindsight, I definitely think that this was some inherent ableism, some maybe subconscious ableism from some of the doctors. We got dismissed a lot in the emergency department. It definitely was like, I'm not a new mom, but I was a new Down syndrome mom. And we definitely got the vibe that they were just like, you're overreacting. You haven't raised a child who has Down syndrome before. They always have breathing problems this time of year. They always are having heart rate issues this time of year. You know what I mean? They were just kind of dismissing what was going on. And so then, beginning of November, we started getting really worried. I thought that she had RSV. I was convinced she had RSV. I was taking videos and sending her breathing to one of my sisters is a respiratory therapist. I was sending them to her. I was sending them to our pediatrician. And then she started having, and this is a little gross, TMI, but you know, it is what it is, this crazy diarrhea, insane diarrhea. We were taking Liam's diapers and putting them around her diapers because it was just so frequent and so much that we could not contain it. And in less than 24 hours, we went to the ED 3 times. The first 2 times, they gave fluids, they tested for everything, and they sent us home. The third time, they got us triaged, and then we're in the waiting room. And this is a little side note because it's so crazy. I just figure I should tell the story. Addie, like I said, was having diarrhea. So I was in the emergency department lobby waiting to be called back and to get a room and everything. And I was hyping myself up. I was like, I am going to convince them this time something is wrong with my child, you know? And so Addie was doing her thing and having diarrhea. So I take her to the bathroom in the lobby, and there is somebody crying in the bathroom stall, but it's an emergency department. So I was like, okay. So I'm changing Addie on the changing table, and all of a sudden, this teenage girl opens the door, and she's not wearing any pants, and she's sobbing, and she goes, I think I'm having a baby. Can you help me? And she was actively having a baby. And I grab Addie like half naked, her diaper was on, but she wasn't dressed again. And I run out and I like yell for somebody, and I'm like, we need help in here. And they came, and right in front of my eyes, they brought a hospital bed into the bathroom, and she gave birth in that freaking bathroom. And I saw the whole thing, and it was crazy. It was wild. It was like an episode of Grey's Anatomy or something, honestly. Like, I found out later that she didn't know she was pregnant. She was an athlete. She was very young. She was an adult, but she was like, I think 19 or 20. I don't want to like give any information away. And it was crazy. And her partner was sitting out in the lobby the whole time, but like, it's a pretty big lobby. He had no idea what was going on, basically, long story short. And I watched them wheel her out of that freaking bathroom with a newborn baby in her arms. And I was like crying, and I was so emotional. I was like, that was wild and beautiful. Oh my God, I cannot believe that just happened. I was like texting my group chat of my friends, like keeping them updated because it was so crazy. After all that craziness, I had to get back to focus, and we got called back pretty shortly after that, actually. And that was when things started to go really downhill. It was really obvious right away that they were not treating me the same as they had the last few hours when we had come in the last couple of times. Everybody was like whispering and hush hush, and doctors were coming and going, and nurses were coming, and everybody was being really attentive. And Addie was incredibly acidotic, basically, and she was deteriorating really fast. She was getting really sick really fast, and we got admitted basically right away to the peds floor at our local hospital. And they were discussing sending us up to the children's hospital 2 hours away in Portland, Dornbeckers. And they kept going back and forth, kind of humming and hawing. They gave her a feeding tube. We couldn't get her to eat anything by mouth. And they did so much testing, so much testing. Could not figure out what was going on. We spent 10 days, I think it was. 10 days, yep, at our hospital down here. One of those days, another crazy side note, when the other kids came to visit Addie, Liam came, and we had got some hospital food from downstairs, including a vegetarian sausage patty, and it was vegetarian, and so this was a learning experience for me, but I assumed it was fine for him to eat because, vegetarian is like, oh, it won't have eggs in it. Well, now I realize I need to say vegan, not vegetarian. So he ate like 2 bites of the sausage patty, not very much at all, and immediately starts just swelling up. And we were like, ran out to one of the nurses and we're like, we think that he's like having a reaction, and they were like, take him down to the ED right now. And so we went from the 8th floor down to the 1st floor, and Liam got admitted fast into the ED basically immediately. And so we had both kids in the hospital at the same time. And you gotta laugh or else you'll cry, because we were making all these kinds of jokes about how, he wanted attention, and he said that she was stealing the spotlight, and so he just wanted his own hospital room. He was totally fine. He just needed, some epinephrine. He was fine. But that was pretty crazy. And then Addie stayed in the hospital for that Thanksgiving, which was kind of reminiscent of the year before, while I spent that Thanksgiving waiting to find out the news. This Thanksgiving, she was in the hospital. It sucked to be separated from her. And then on the 10th or 11th day, in the peds floor at our local hospital, she started deteriorating really fast, and we could tell that all the nurses were getting worried. They went and got the doctor. The doctor came and got us and took us to a private, like, little meeting room, and was like, we've called the life flight, and we're taking her up to the PICU. One of you can ride along in the life flight. The other two, because my dad was there as well, the other 2 of you need to drive. And so I got ready to go in the helicopter with Addie, and my dad and husband started the drive up to Portland, and I got in that helicopter, and it was a very fast ride, and I've never been so scared in my life, because I didn't know what was going on in the back of that helicopter where Addie was with those 2 medics. I didn't know anything that was going on. It was really terrifying. We got to Dornbeckers, and she got admitted to the PICU, the Pediatric Intensive Care Unit, immediately. And they had been talking about maybe intubating, but we're kind of, again, going back and forth with it, kind of like humming and hawing, and they weren't really sure. And so we were there for a couple of days, and my husband drives back home. We've got, we were like, he has to work. So she had been kind of stable relatively. Again, nobody could figure out what was going on. We had so many doctors trying to help us, but they had her stable. That was what mattered. So my husband drives back down to where we live, and my dad came up and was there, because you could only have 2 adults in the room at any given time. Again, COVID and PICU and stuff. And in the middle of the night, my dad woke me up and was like, hey, Addie's kind of breathing funny. I think that you should call Zach. Like, I'm getting bad vibes. My dad said that, not me. And I woke up and I was like kind of assessing, and nobody seemed that worried, but I was like in agreement. I was like, something does seem off. I called Zach and I was like, I think you need to come up here. It was like 1 a.m. at the time I called him. And he's like, okay, I'm coming. So he starts to drive up, but again, it's a 2-hour drive. And again, this was like a scene in Grey's Anatomy, or some kind of medical drama or something, because as my husband walked in, they were calling a code on Addie. He walked in while a woman was on a stool above Addie working on her, trying to get her to breathe again. Her heart had stopped, and she was not breathing. And they intubated her while I stood in a corner sobbing, and Zach helped me. And I'm so glad he got there in time, but it was really traumatic. It was really, really traumatic. And in a crazy twist of events, the doctor who intubated her came up to us maybe an hour or 2 later. He was like, I don't know if you remember me. I was like, sir, you saved my daughter's life. I will never forget your face. Anyways, he went on to tell us that he actually has a sister with Down syndrome. And I was like, what are the odds? That's amazing, and he told us some personal little anecdotes, which he totally didn't have to, but he did. And he made us feel a little bit better, but it was really scary. All of it was really scary. And so we just basically sat by her bedside and hoped that she would wake up. I was like, I will I will take any suggestions if anybody knows what's going on. I was on social media saying like we'll take any prayers, any random like anecdotes, your cousins, brothers, aunts, cats, friend had the same issue, because doctors could not tell us what was going on. We had every doctor under the sun coming and running tests and trying to figure out what was going on with Addie. And I'll just do a spoiler right now. To this day, we don't know what happened. She was in kidney failure, respiratory failure, and heart failure, and they ruled out that the cause was her ASD, her atrial septal defect. So her congenital heart defect was not the cause of her cardiac arrest, which is just crazy. Addie, to this day, also still has scarring on her leg and arms from where they would try to put arterial lines, PICC lines, and her skin was eating itself. The one on her thigh, you could see to her, almost to her bone, like you could see her nerves and stuff. I have pictures that I still, 3 years later, cannot bear to look at. It was truly wild. I don't really have a nice way to wrap up this story, but we never figured out what was wrong. Eventually, Addie got better. She got moved up to the peds floor. She came home on an NG feeding tube, and 7-8 months later, we got her a G tube. She's never eaten since, to this day. She's had some surgeries since then. One was a supraglottoplasty, which is specifically to fix her floppy airway, and she still doesn't eat. She's been in and out of feeding therapies as well as lots of other therapies, but she just isn't interested in eating. So if the worst thing that happens to her is that she never eats by mouth, will that kind of suck? Of course, because eating's fun. Eating is a communal experience. Eating is, enjoyable. But she's here and she's alive and we get to live life with her. And so I will be fine if I have to tube feed her every day of her life forever. Can't win them all. So, really, again, there's no really nice, happy way to wrap this up. We did tons of outpatient testing. We still have a lot of doctors because Addie, we still don't know why all that happened. And Addie will need heart surgery. We're very, very hopeful. Her doctors seem very, very confident that the next year they will be able to close up her ASD in the cath lab, which is more of a procedure, not open heart surgery. I mean, it's still serious, but it's not anywhere to the level of open heart surgery. So we are very thankful for that. Yeah. I definitely missed some stuff. Like, I'm just now remembering that we thought Addie was deaf for the first year of her life, and we did all these testing, and we did anesthesia to do different ABR testing and stuff, automated brainstem response testing is what that is, sorry. And all this stuff, only to find out when she was about 18 months old that she's just a jerk. She was just ignoring us, basically. We've done genetic testing, which has told us a lot. It's told us that she very likely has autism as well, which is so interesting. She has an MYO5A gene. She likely has ocular albinism, which is like albino albinism, in her eyes. She sees things that way it was described to me by her ophthalmologist is that if you and I are seeing in like a 2025 like LED HGTV whatever, she probably sees like a 90s TV, like all grainy, and her depth perception isn't great, that's definitely true. We have to help her out like with shadows and stuff. That kind of throws her off. So, yeah, she has a lot going on. She's missing optic nerves behind her eyes. We found out recently in an MRI that she does have a traumatic brain injury, a TBI, from her cardiac arrest. I'm sure I'm forgetting stuff, but we're so beyond lucky that she's just here. She lived through that. She is such a badass. She is a fighter. She is so strong. She is my hero. And she is so happy and just kicking butt at life. And we are so lucky to have her here with us. I could gush about her forever. I won't, though. I'll wrap this up because I talked for a long time and it's just me talking, so this might be really boring. But I really appreciate everybody listening, and I appreciate all the support you guys have given me, and I love that we've been able to celebrate Down Syndrome Awareness Month with this podcast a little bit. If you've made it this far, please follow the podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts at The Inclusion Effect. Leave me 5 stars and share the podcast with a friend or two. And go follow me on social media. I'm at The Inclusion Effect on TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook. My personal TikTok is at Uplife of Addie. And I just really appreciate everybody allowing me to do this. This is so creative and fun for me. I have just had the best time with this podcast experience so far. And I have so many great interviews coming up to share with all of you guys. I really can't wait. Thank you so much to everyone for helping me build this community of amazing, passionate advocates. And I'll talk to you next time. Thanks.